My hands were shaking so bad that the champagne in my flute looked like a miniature storm at sea. It was spilling over the rim, sticky and cold against my fingers, dripping onto the balcony railing, but I couldn't put the glass down. If I put it down, I might fall down. I was standing on the terrace of the Hawthorne Ballroom, a space I had personally spent 6 months restoring, analyzing paint chips the size of fingernails to match the original 1920s gold leaf, and inside, through the double glass doors, 200 of Boston's wealthiest people were applauding. They weren't clapping for the keynote speaker. They weren't clapping for the mayor. They had just finished clapping for me. And standing in the center of that ballroom, looking like he'd just swallowed a live grenade, was Austin, the man who had spent the last 3 years systematically peeling away my confidence like layers of old wallpaper. He was alone. His date had backed away from him like he was contagious. The silence around him was a physical thing, a vacuum in the middle of the noise. "You okay?" I jumped, nearly dropping the glass. It was Mason. He didn't touch me. He knew better than to startle a woman in shock, but he was close enough that I could smell the starch on his shirt and that clean antiseptic soap smell surgeons never seem to lose. "I think I'm going to throw up," I said, my voice sounding weirdly calm, like it was coming from a radio in the next room. Mason nodded, looking out at the city skyline. "That's a reasonable physiological response to adrenaline, but don't ruin the dress. It's a really good dress." I looked down at the emerald silk. It was my armor. "He looked so small," I whispered. "He always seemed 10 feet tall to me. When did he get so small?" "He didn't shrink, Mal," Mason said quietly. "You finally stood up." It sounds like a movie moment, right? The triumphant heroine, the defeated villain, the handsome doctor by her side. But here's the thing about real life. It's messier. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and my brain was replaying the loop of the last 7 months. To understand why I was shaking on a balcony in a $600 dress, enjoying the destruction of a man I used to think I loved, you have to understand the crawl space. You have to understand the day I finally broke. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. 7 months ago, I wasn't standing on balconies drinking champagne. I was belly crawling through the attic of the Winslow estate, inhaling dust that was older than the Great Depression. It was 100 degrees up there, literally. It was early June, and the Winslow attic was basically a convection oven designed to kill historical preservationists. I was wearing a Tyvek suit that was sticking to my back, a respirator that made me sound like Darth Vader with asthma, and thick work gloves coated in grime. I was tracing a timber frame joint from the 1880s, trying to figure out why the east wing was sagging 3 inches to the left. It was meticulous, sweaty, unglamorous work, and I loved it. I loved the logic of it. Wood doesn't lie to you. Gravity doesn't gaslight you. If a beam is rotting, it's rotting. It doesn't tell you that you're imagining the rot because you're oversensitive. Then my phone buzzed against the plywood floorboards. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. The aggressive staccato vibration that meant only one person, Austin. I sighed, blowing dust out of my respirator valve, and peeled off one glove. My hand was slick with sweat. I swiped the screen. "I'm in a crawl space, Austin," I answered. "Please tell me the apartment isn't on fire." "Lunch, tomorrow, 1 p.m. Bistro Lumiere," he said. "No hello, no, how are you? Just a summons." I sat up, banging my helmet against a rafter. "Ow! Austin, I can't. I have the Historical Commission meeting at 2 tomorrow. I've been prepping for this for weeks. If I miss it, we don't get the permit for the copper flashing." "Move it," he said. His voice had that tone, the "I am a senior associate and you are a child" tone. "This isn't a request, Mallory. The senior partners are taking the new associates out. Richard Patterson and Thomas Brennan. They're bringing their wives. I need you there." "I can't just move a city commission meeting," I tried to explain, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my wrist. There's a docket. Bureaucracy doesn't care about your lunch. Figure it out, he snapped. This is partnership track, Mallory. Do you want to be the reason I don't make partner? Because frankly, your lack of support lately has been noticed. There it was. The hook. The guilt. The implication that my career was just a cute hobby that was actively getting in the way of his real work. Okay, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. I'll try to reschedule. Don't try. Do. He paused. And Mallory? Wear something decent? Not your work clothes? Don't show up smelling like sawdust. He hung up before I could answer. I sat there in the dark, sweltering attic, staring at a rusty nail head. Don't show up smelling like sawdust. Like the evidence of my hard work was something shameful. Like the dust of history was just dirt to him. I should have thrown the phone across the attic. I should have stayed in the crawl space. But I didn't. Because 3 years of emotional erosion is a hell of a drug. Friday morning was a disaster of my own making. I spent 40 minutes in the shower, scrubbing my hands with a pumice stone until my skin was raw, terrified that there might be a speck of grime under my fingernails. Austin had a way of looking at my hands like they were foreign objects, inspecting them for flaws. I stood in front of my closet, wrapped in a towel, staring at my clothes. My wardrobe was split into 2 distinct personalities, Mallory the architect, jeans, boots, flannel, high-vis vests, and Austin's girlfriend, sheath dresses, uncomfortable heels, muted colors. I pulled out the navy dress. You know the one, every woman has one, the corporate wife cosplay dress. It was stiff, high-necked, and totally inappropriate for a 90-degree day in June, but it looked expensive. You look professional, I told my reflection. You look like you belong. My reflection looked back at me with tired eyes. I tried to cover the dark circles with concealer, but the lighting in my loft, usually my favorite thing about the apartment, was unforgiving. I lived in a renovated textile mill downtown. Exposed brick, original maple floors, I'd refinished myself on weekends, massive industrial windows. It was my sanctuary. But right now, standing there in that stiff blue dress, I felt like an intruder in my own home. I left 20 minutes early to account for the tunnel traffic. The air conditioning in my Honda CR-V was on the fritz, blowing lukewarm air that smelled faintly of mildew. I was sweating before I even hit the highway. My phone pinged, a text from Austin. Don't be late. Richard hates lateness. I wasn't late. I was never late. In my line of work, if you're late, concrete sets. If you're late, structural integrity fails. But he always assumed I was a chaotic mess because I didn't work in a glass tower. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. Just get through lunch, I told myself. Smile, nod, laugh at the lawyer jokes. Don't talk about timber rot. Don't bore them. That was the mantra Austin had drilled into me. Don't bore them with the details. I pulled into the parking garage, checked my makeup in the rearview mirror, and pasted on a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I felt like I was walking to an execution, not a meal. Bistro Lumiere was one of those places that charges you for the ambiance and forgets to season the food. It was all white tablecloths, crystal goblets, and waiters who looked like they were judging your credit score. The hostess looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my shoes, sensible heels, not designer, before giving me a tight smile. Mr. Caldwell's party is on the patio. Of course, I said, because it's 100 degrees. I walked out onto the patio. The sun was brutal. It was bouncing off the white linens and blinding me. Austin was holding court at a center table, looking cool and crisp in a gray bespoke suit. Sitting with him were 2 older men who looked like they owned sailboats they didn't know how to sail, and 2 women who looked like they spent a lot of time at spas I couldn't afford. Mallory! Austin stood up, checking his watch immediately. I was 5 minutes early, but he checked it anyway. He kissed my cheek, but it wasn't a kiss. It was an air press near my ear. Glad you could make it. He turned to the table. Everyone, this is Mallory Hayes. Mallory, This is Richard Patterson and his wife Madeline, and Thomas Brennan with his wife Claire." "A pleasure," Richard said, not standing up. He gave me the scan. You know the scan. The quick flicker of eyes from hairline to shoes, assessing value. Is she an asset or a liability? "Nice to meet you," I said, shaking hands. My palm was dry. Thank God for the pumice scrubbing. But I felt grimy inside. Madeline Patterson smiled at me. She was older, maybe 60, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and intelligent eyes. "Austin tells us you're in housing?" I sat down, placing my napkin in my lap. Something like that. A waiter materialized and poured me a glass of Sancerre without asking. Austin had already ordered wine for the table. Of course he had. "Mallory has a very interesting little job," Austin said, patting my hand. It felt like he was patting a dog. "But let's not talk shop yet. Richard, tell me about the summary judgment on the quiet title case." And just like that, I was dismissed. I sipped the wine. It was excellent. It tasted like cold grapes and money. I wished I was back in the attic inhaling fiberglass. The appetizers arrived. Tiny, sad mounds of tartar that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The conversation revolved exclusively around the firm. Who was billing what? Who was sleeping with the paralegals? Followed by raucous laughter. And which client was being a nightmare? I did what I always did. I performed. I nodded at the right times. I smiled when they laughed. I made myself invisible. Then, during a lull, Madeline turned to me again. She seemed bored by the legal talk. "So Mallory, Austin cut you off earlier. You're an architect, correct?" The table went quiet. It was the courtesy silence. Let the girlfriend speak for 30 seconds. "Yes," I said, sitting up a little straighter. "I specialize in historic preservation, restoring 19th century structures mostly." Madeline's face lit up. "Oh, really? My grandmother had a Victorian in Cambridge. We're trying to figure out what to do with the woodwork. It's all rotting." "That's actually my specialty," I said, feeling a spark of genuine interest. "I'm currently leading the restoration on the Winslow estate in Brookline. It's a full envelope restoration, roof, foundation, everything." I was about to explain the difference between modern cement and lime mortar when Austin cleared his throat, loudly. "Mallory is being a bit grand," he said, chuckling. That chuckle, that condescending, "isn't she cute" sound. She's more of a decorator for old houses. She picks out paint colors and doorknobs. It's a hobby, really. The air left the table. My face burned. "It's not a hobby, Austin," I said, my voice tight. "I'm the lead architect. It's a $2 million structural renovation." Austin rolled his eyes. He actually rolled them. "Babe, come on, you work with a contractor. You're part of a team. Let's not exaggerate for the partners. It's unbecoming." He looked at Richard and Thomas with a conspiring grin. "She gets very attached to her little projects. We've been talking about her getting a real estate license, something with actual growth potential." I froze. I stared at him. He had just called me a liar and a failure in front of the most important people in his professional life. Richard looked at his wine glass. Claire looked at the view. Madeline looked at me with something that felt like pity. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to list my degrees, my certifications, the fact that the mayor knew my name. But my throat closed up. Every instinct I had was screaming, "Don't make a scene, don't be the crazy girlfriend." "Actually," a voice said from the end of the table. I blinked. I had completely forgotten there was another person there. A man had been sitting at the far end next to Claire. He hadn't said much during the legal circle jerk. I knew he was a client or a consultant, but I hadn't caught his name. "I know the Winslow project," the man said. His voice was deep, calm, and incredibly steady. "I drove past it last week. The scaffolding work alone is impressive engineering. That's not decorating, that's structural surgery." Austin's smile tight, brittle. "Marcus, you're a doctor, not a contractor. You don't understand the nuances of the industry. It's mason, the man corrected gently. And no, I'm a surgeon. I know precision when I see it, and I know when someone is minimizing expertise. Austin snapped. It was instantaneous. His face went red. He hated being corrected. He especially hated being corrected by another man in front of his bosses. He turned on me, as if it was my fault the stranger had spoken. He leaned forward and his hand came up. He pointed his index finger right at my face. It was such an aggressive, accusatory gesture, like he was marking me for a drone strike. "Let's be honest, Mallory," he said, his voice rising. It was loud, too loud for a French bistro. "You're nothing special. You play in the dirt with old buildings because you don't have the ambition for the real world." The restaurant went dead silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. A waiter stopped with a water pitcher mid-pour. "A woman like you," Austin spat, "could never stand beside a man like me. You should be grateful I even bring you to these things." The heat on my skin was unbearable. It felt like I was physically on fire. Everyone was staring. The partners looked horrified. Madeline's mouth was open. I looked at his finger, that shaking, angry finger pointing at my nose, and suddenly the shame evaporated. It just vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I saw him. I really saw him. He wasn't a partner. He wasn't a catch. He was a bully in a tailored suit who was terrified that I might be interesting. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the patio stones. "Mallory, sit down!" Austin hissed. "Don't be dramatic." I picked up my purse. I looked him dead in the eye. "Thank you," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are." I tossed my napkin onto the untouched tartare. "I'm leaving," I said. "And Austin, good luck standing alone, because you're right. I can't stand beside you." I walked away. I walked past the staring tables. I walked past the frozen waiter. I walked out into the blinding sunshine, leaving him pointing at empty air. The second I got into the elevator of the parking garage, I collapsed. Not literally, but internally. My knees turned to water. I had to lean against the dirty metal wall of the elevator, gasping for air like I'd just sprinted a mile. I just walked out on a partner lunch. I just dumped Austin in public. I found my car, scrambled inside, and locked the doors. The heat inside the vehicle was suffocating, but I didn't care. I gripped the steering wheel and just shook. Sobs tore out of me, ugly, jagged sounds. It wasn't sadness. It was the release of 3 years of tension. Then the phone started. Psst, psst, psst. I looked at the screen through blurry eyes. "Austin, are you insane?" "Austin, get back here right now." "Austin, you just embarrassed me in front of the entire firm." "Austin, walking out was childish. We need to talk about your impulse control." "Austin, pick up the phone, Mallory." He was doing it again, rewriting reality in real time. In his version, he hadn't insulted me. I had embarrassed him by reacting. I watched the texts roll in, a wall of gray bubbles demanding my submission. "You're nothing special." I looked at that text notification, and then I did something I should have done years ago. I didn't reply. I didn't apologize. I didn't try to explain myself. I opened his contact card. I scrolled down to the bottom. I hit block caller. The buzzing stopped. I sat there in the silence of the parking garage, listening to the ticking of my car's cooling engine. It felt like the air pressure in the car had dropped. I could breathe. I put the car in reverse and drove home, leaving the phone face down on the passenger seat. My apartment was quiet, too quiet. I threw my purse on the floor and paced around the kitchen. I needed to hear a voice that wasn't gaslighting me. I called Jules. Jules picked up on the first ring. "Hey, how was the Stepford Wives' lunch?" "I left," I said. "I walked out." "Wait, what?" Jules's voice sharpened instantly. "What happened?" "He told me..." My voice cracked. He pointed his finger at me in front of everyone and told me I wasn't special. He said a woman like me could never stand beside a man like him. There was a silence on the line. Then, very quietly, Jules said, "I'm going to kill him. I'm going to drive downtown and run him over with my Vespa." I let out a wet, shaky laugh. "I blocked him, Jules. I think it's over." "Good," Jules shouted. "Good. Mallory, listen to me. He has been eating you alive for 3 years. Do you remember when you won the Preservation Award? He told you it was a nice participation trophy." "I know," I whispered. "Do you remember when you wanted to apply for the PhD program and he asked if you were planning to be a professional student forever?" "I know." "He hated that you were talented," Jules said. "He hated it. You were always the son, Mal. He just wanted to be the only gravity in the room." I sank onto my kitchen floor, leaning against the dishwasher. I feel stupid. I wasted 3 years. "No," Jules said firmly. "You didn't waste them. You survived them. And now you're out. Do not unblock him. If he shows up, you call the police. If he sends a carrier pigeon, you shoot it." We talked for an hour. She reminded me of who I was before Austin, the Mallory who climbed scaffolding, the Mallory who could identify wood rot by smell, the Mallory who didn't care about salad forks. By the time I hung up, the shaking had stopped. I felt hollow but stable, like a building that had been gutted but the foundation was still good. I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt haunted by the ghost of the relationship. So, on Sunday morning, before the sun was even up, I went to the only place that made sense, the Winslow estate. The site was deserted. It was 6 a.m. on a Sunday. The old Victorian mansion loomed in the mist, a skeletal beauty of scaffolding and peeled paint. I let myself in with the keypad code. The smell hit me immediately. Sawdust, old plaster, damp wood. It smelled like home. I walked into the ballroom. We were in the middle of restoring the parquet floor, a geometric nightmare of oak, walnut, and cherry that had been water damaged for decades. I sat down on the subfloor, pulled out my sketchbook, and just started drawing the grain patterns. I needed to focus on something small, something solvable. "You're here early." I jumped about a foot. Standing in the doorway was Felix, the lead carpenter. Felix was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. He was in his 60s, looked like he was carved out of granite, and usually treated architects like necessary evils. "Jesus, Felix," I said, clutching my chest. "I didn't think anyone was working today." "Forgot my level," he grunted. He walked over, his heavy boots echoing on the wood. He looked down at my sketchbook. "You figuring out that corner transition?" "Yeah," I said. "The walnut is shrinking faster than the oak." "I think we need to use a slip-tongue joint." Felix squinted at my drawing. He was silent for a long time. Austin's voice echoed in my head. "You're a decorator. You play in the dirt." "You're the only one who cares," Felix said suddenly. I looked up. "What?" "Most architects," Felix said, spitting the word like a curse. "They draw pretty pictures and leave us to figure out how to build it. They don't know wood. They don't know that walnut moves." He pointed a calloused finger at my drawing. Not an accusatory finger like Austin's, a respectful one. "You respect the wood," Felix said. "That's why the crew likes you. You ain't just drawing, you're building." He nodded once, turned around, and walked out. I stared after him. A 60-year-old carpenter who had been doing this since before I was born just gave me more validation in 30 seconds than Austin had given me in 3 years. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in graphite smudges. They weren't manicured. They were working hands. I am not a decorator, I thought. I am a builder. 2 days later, on Tuesday, I was back in the office, a small cubicle in the corner of a shared workspace, when my laptop pinged. Notification. LinkedIn message from Madeline Patterson. My stomach dropped. Madeline. The partner's wife. She was probably writing to tell me how unprofessional I was, how I had ruined her lunch, how I was banned from ever dating a lawyer again. I hovered the mouse over the delete button. I didn't want to read it. I wanted to burn the bridge and salt the earth. But curiosity is a traitor. I clicked it. Subject, Tuesday lunch. Dear Mallory, I hesitated to write this, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about what happened. I wanted to apologize. I should have said something in the moment. I was so shocked by Austin's behavior that I froze, and I am sorry for that. I also thought you should know what happened after you left, Doctor. Rhodes, the surgeon at the end of the table, didn't let it slide. The moment you walked out, he turned to Austin and tore strips off him. He told Austin that his behavior was repugnant and professionally disqualifying. Richard and Thomas pulled Austin aside immediately. There was a very serious conversation in the parking lot. I don't know the specifics of firm politics, but the phrase character issues was used. Dr. Rhodes asked for your contact info. I hope you don't mind, but I gave him your email. He seemed very insistent on apologizing to you personally for not intervening sooner. You held your head high, Mallory. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Best, Madeline. I read the message 3 times. Someone had stood up for me. A stranger, a surgeon I didn't even know. And Austin, the man who thought he was untouchable, was now facing character issues because of his own mouth. I didn't feel happy exactly. I felt lightness. The heavy blanket of gaslighting was lifting. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't oversensitive. I was right. I saved the message. Then I went back to work. I had a mansion to save. 3 months after the bistro incident, the universe decided to test whether my spine had actually hardened or if I was just faking it. I got a call from the Hawthorne Preservation Trust. They wanted me to bid on the Hawthorne Theater restoration. This wasn't just a project. This was the project. A 1928 Art Deco palace that had been boarded up since the late 90s. The budget was $12 million. They're interviewing 3 firms, my new assistant Leo told me. Leo was 22, wore vintage cardigans, and was fiercely protective of my schedule. The other 2 are massive corporate firms from New York. We're the underdog. I like being the underdog, I lied. I was terrified. We did the initial walkthrough on a Tuesday. The theater was a wreck. The ceiling was peeling like sunburned skin, and the smell of pigeon guano was overwhelming. But the bones were magnificent. I was walking through the orchestra pit with the board of directors, 6 people who looked like they owned half of Boston, when I saw it. Lying in a pile of debris near the stage left exit was a chunk of the original acoustic paneling. It wasn't just plaster. It was a specific horsehair reinforced composite that had been patented in 1927 to amplify unamplified voices. It was the holy grail of acoustic archaeology. Don't touch that, one of the board members, a man named Mr. Sterling, warned as I crouched down. It's all trash. It's not trash, I whispered. I picked it up. It was heavy, about the size of a dinner plate, with the original fluted molding still intact. This is the DNA of the room's sound. If we analyze this, we can recreate the exact acoustics of opening night, 1928. I saw the spark in Sterling's eyes. That was my hook. The other firms would talk about lobby paint and seat fabrics. I was going to sell them the sound. I'm taking this, I said, pulling a heavy-duty sample bag from my kit. I'll analyze the composition and bring it to the final pitch on Friday. Be careful with it, Sterling said. It's the only piece that survived the water damage. I'll guard it with my life, I promised. I put the sample in my reinforced pelican case. I felt invincible. I had the ace up my sleeve. Friday morning was a symphony of chaos. The presentation was at 10:00 a.m. I was in the Uber at 9:15 reviewing my notes. The pelican case was at my feet. I was wearing my power suit, charcoal gray, tailored, no nonsense. The driver took a sharp turn to avoid a cyclist, slammed on the brakes, and my pelican case slid violently across the floor, smashing into the metal seat track of the passenger side. Thunk. It was a heavy sound. A bad sound. You okay back there? The driver asked. Fine, I said, breathless. I arrived at the Trust's headquarters at 9:45. I went straight to the restroom to check the sample. I laid the case on the marble counter, undid the latches, and opened the lid. My heart stopped. The impact hadn't just cracked the sample, it had pulverized it. The 100-year-old horsehair plaster had disintegrated into a pile of gray dust and rubble. The structural integrity had been compromised by decades of rot, and the impact had finished the job. I stared at the pile of dust. This was my opener. My entire pitch was built around handing this physical object to Mr. Sterling and saying, "This is the voice of the theater." Now I had a bag of dirt. "Oh God," I whispered. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale. "Think, Mallory, think. You are an architect, not a magician." I had 10 minutes. I couldn't glue dust back together. I walked out of the restroom, my mind racing. I went to the waiting area. The receptionist smiled at me. "They'll be ready for you in 5 minutes, Ms. Hayes." I looked around the room, modern furniture, sterile art, and then I saw it. In the corner, there was a display case of historical artifacts from the trust. Behind the glass, sitting on a velvet cushion, was a rusted 1920s microphone, not from the theater, just a generic antique. But it was the cushion I was looking at. It was crushed, red velvet, thick, dense. An idea, crazy and desperate, slammed into my brain. "I need to borrow this chair," I told the receptionist, grabbing a heavy, fabric-upholstered side chair from the waiting nook. "Excuse me?" she asked. "Just for the room. I need a prop." I dragged the chair into the boardroom as the doors opened. The 6 board members stared at me. The 2 New York architects from the previous slot were just leaving, looking slick and confident with their laser pointers. I didn't set up my PowerPoint. I didn't open my laptop. I placed the heavy chair in the center of the room. Then I took the bag of pulverized dust from my case and dumped it onto the polished mahogany conference table. Gasps. Mr. Sterling looked horrified. "Ms. Hayes, what on earth?" "This," I interrupted, my voice projecting from my diaphragm, "is what the other firms are going to sell you." I pointed to the dust. "They see the history of the hawthorn as something dead, something fragile that broke. They're going to suggest modern acoustic panels hidden behind drywall. They're going to sanitize the sound." I grabbed the heavy upholstered chair I'd dragged in, but the hawthorn wasn't built for silence. It was built for texture. I hit the back of the chair hard. Thump. It was a dull, absorbed sound. "The original plaster," I said, gesturing to the dust, "was horsehair and lime. It didn't absorb sound like this modern foam. It bounced it. It gave the voice teeth." I looked Sterling in the eye. I broke that sample. It shattered because it was tired. "But I analyzed the chemical composition before it broke. I don't want to preserve the rot. I want to rebuild the recipe. I'm not going to patch the theater. I'm going to recast the entire acoustic shell using the 1928 formula." I leaned over the table, hands on the mahogany. "You don't need a renovation. You need a resurrection, and I'm the only one crazy enough to mix the plaster by hand to get it right." Silence. Absolute silence in the room. Then Mr. Sterling cracked a smile. "Resurrection," he mused. "I like that word." I walked out of that meeting shaking, sweating through my charcoal suit. I had improvised my career on a pile of dust and a waiting room chair. By the time I got back to the office, Leo was holding a bottle of champagne. "We got the call," he screamed. "They canceled the 3rd interview. You got it." High on the adrenaline of the Hawthorne contract, I made the mistake of thinking I was safe. I went to Whole Foods. It was a Wednesday evening. I was standing in the produce section debating between organic kale, which I felt I should eat, and regular spinach, which I actually would eat, when I felt a presence. "Mallory." The voice was like a violin string being tightened until it snapped. I froze. I knew that voice. I turned around. Standing next to a display of heirloom tomatoes was Eleanor Caldwell, Austin's mother. She was wearing a cream linen suit that probably cost more than my car. She looked immaculate, terrifying, and completely out of place next to the wet vegetables. "Mrs. Caldwell," I said, gripping my shopping basket. "Hello." She didn't say hello. She stepped into my personal space, blocking my exit toward the bakery. "We need to talk," she said. "I don't think we do," I replied, surprised by my own firmness. "I'm just buying groceries." "Austin is devastated," she said. She said it like an accusation, like I had run over a puppy. "He has been struggling at the firm. He's distracted. His billing hours are down." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, "but that's not my problem." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you've won something, don't you? Because you made a scene? Because you walked away?" She picked up a tomato, inspected it with disdain, and put it back. "Let me tell you the reality of the situation, Mallory. You are 31 years old. You are a woman in a construction field. You are not getting younger, and frankly, you are not getting any more marketable." My jaw dropped. "Excuse me?" "Austin was a catch," she hissed. "He comes from a good family. He has a future. You have pride, and women in your position don't have the luxury of pride. You should call him. Apologize. He's willing to forgive you if you admit you were hormonal." Hormonal? The word hung in the air, smelling of misogyny and expensive perfume. I looked at this woman. For 3 years, I had tried to impress her. I had bought her thoughtful gifts. I had listened to her critique my hair, my clothes, my laugh. I set my basket down on the floor. "You're right about one thing, Eleanor," I said. I used her first name. I had never done that before. Her eyes widened. "I don't have the luxury of time," I continued, my voice steady enough to be heard by the guy restocking the peppers. "I don't have the time to waste on people who think I'm a depreciating asset, and I certainly don't have the luxury of settling for a man who needs his mommy to fight his battles in the vegetable aisle." "How dare you?" she gasped. "I'm not calling him," I said, "and if you approach me again, I'll file a harassment order. Have a nice day." I turned and walked away. I left my kale. I left my dinner. I walked straight out the automatic doors, got into my car, and screamed. It wasn't a scream of sadness. It was a scream of rage, pure, clarifying rage. 2 weeks later, the Architectural Digest piece dropped. They had sent a photographer to the Winslow estate. The photos were stunning. Golden hour light hitting the restored woodwork, close-ups of the joinery. But the centerpiece was a portrait of me. I was wearing my hard hat, sawdust on my jeans, holding blueprints. I looked tired, but I looked formidable. The headline read, "The Architect of Memory, How Mallory Hayes is Saving Boston's History." My phone exploded. Emails from colleagues. A text from Jules saying, "Hot damn." A LinkedIn request from the mayor, and then around noon a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Unknown, saw the article. Impressive. You finally look like a pro." I stared at the screen. I knew the cadence. I knew the backhanded compliment. Finally, as if I hadn't been a pro before the magazine said so. "Unknown. We should grab a drink. Celebrate. I've been doing some thinking, and I think we could be a power couple now. You've leveled up." He was propositioning me, not because he missed me, not because he loved me, but because my stock value had gone up. I was now an accessory that would look good on his arm at a partner's dinner. "Leveled up," I muttered to my empty office, like I'm a video game character. I didn't feel the urge to reply. I didn't feel the urge to tell him off. The anger from the grocery store had burned down into something like ash, cold and inert. I swiped left. Delete thread, block caller. It took 2 seconds. It felt like shedding skin. September in Newport, Rhode Island is beautiful. The preservation conference was held at one of the gilded mansions on the cliffs. The air smelled of salt and old money. I was the keynote speaker for the afternoon session. My talk was titled, "Structural Empathy, Listening to What Buildings Want." I was nervous, but once I got on stage, the nerves vanished. I talked about the Winslow estate. I talked about the Hawthorne acoustic sample and how I broke it. The crowd laughed. They nodded. They were my people. When I finished, the applause was genuine. I walked down the steps of the stage, flushed with success, and almost ran into a chest in a navy blazer. "That was eloquent," a deep voice said, especially the part about the horsehair. I looked up. It was him, the man from the bistro, Mason. He looked different without the tension of the restaurant. He looked tired, doctor tired, deep lines around his eyes, but he was smiling. "Dr. Rhodes," I said, "what is a trauma surgeon doing at an architecture conference?" "Please, call me Mason," he said, "and I'm here because I bought a brownstone in the South End that is currently trying to kill me." I laughed. "Old houses fight back." "I noticed," he said. He hesitated, shifting his weight. "Look, Mallory, I've wanted to reach out for months, but I didn't want to be intrusive after the bistro." "Madeline told me what you did," I said softly, "that you stood up for me after I left." He grimaced. "I didn't do enough. I should have stopped him before you had to walk out. I watched a bully pick at you for an hour and I stayed polite because of social contract. I regret that." "You spoke up when it mattered," I said. "He's a fool," Mason said. "It wasn't angry. It was just a clinical observation." "I see a lot of trauma, Mallory. I know what damage looks like. He was trying to break you because he couldn't control you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. "This is professional," he said quickly. "Strictly. My contractor is suggesting we tear out the original staircase because it squeaks. I need a second opinion from someone who respects the wood. I'll pay your full consult fee." I took the card. Mason Rhodes, MD, Pediatric Cardiothoracic Surgery. "Don't let them tear out the stairs," I said. "I'll come look at it on Saturday." Mason's house was a crime scene, not literally, but architecturally. It was a gorgeous 1890s shell that had been assaulted by the 1990s. Someone had installed drop ceilings. There was beige laminate flooring over the original hardwoods. "It's bad, isn't it?" Mason asked. We were standing in the hallway. He was wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt that said Mass General Charity Run 2018. He looked younger, softer than he did in a suit. "It's fixable," I said. I crouched down near the baseboard. "See this? This is a false wall. Your original molding is probably still behind here, hiding in the dark." I pulled out a small pry bar from my bag. "Do you trust me?" "I just watched you give a lecture on structural empathy." He grinned. "I trust you." I wedged the bar behind the laminate and pulled. With a screech of nails, the beige plastic popped off. Underneath was glorious dark mahogany wainscoting. "Wow," Mason breathed. We spent the next 2 hours walking through the house. I pointed out water damage, load-bearing walls, and terrible wiring. Mason followed me with a notebook, writing everything down. He didn't interrupt. He didn't mansplain construction to me. He asked questions like, "Why does the lime mortar breathe?" and "How do we support the joist without steel?" We ended up in the kitchen drinking tap water out of plastic cups because he hadn't unpacked fully. "You're a wizard," he said. "I've had 3 contractors in here and none of them saw what you saw." "I'm just a nerd," I shrugged. "It's not brain surgery, which, you actually do." "It's the same thing," Mason said seriously. "It is not. You save lives. I save crown molding." Mason set his cup down. "My dad was a plumber. 30 years. He used to tell me, 'Mason, the world needs excellent doctors, sure, but civilization ends without excellent plumbers. You can survive a heart attack. You can't survive cholera.'" He looked at me intently. "There is no hierarchy of competence, Mallory." "That's a lie people like Austin tell themselves to feel important. You have a mastery over the physical world that I don't have. That deserves respect. Period." My chest felt tight. For 3 years, Austin had made me feel like my work was cute. Mason made me feel like it was foundational. "Thank you," I whispered. "So," he said, changing the subject smoothly, "since I'm saving thousands of dollars on a staircase I don't have to replace, can I buy you dinner? Not a consult dinner, a date dinner." I looked at his kind eyes, his messy hair, his plumber's son hands. Yes, I said. I'd like that. We had been dating for 6 weeks. Quiet dinners, long walks, me teaching him how to strip varnish. When the past tried to kick down my door, I was in my new office. We had moved into a converted warehouse in the seaport. It was open concept, brick and beam. I had 4 employees now. The glass door opened and Austin walked in. He walked past Leo at the front desk. He walked past my junior architect. He marched right into my office like he paid the rent. He looked diminished. His suit was wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept. "You blocked me," he said. "No hello." I stood up slowly behind my desk. "Get out." "We need to talk, Mallory. This has gone on long enough. You've made your point. You're successful. Bravo. Now stop being a child and unblock my number." "Leo!" I called out. Leo appeared in the doorway looking terrified but holding his phone. "I'm calling security, Mal." "Don't you dare!" Austin snapped at him. He turned back to me. "I am trying to apologize, you stubborn—" "You're not apologizing," I yelled. "You're trespassing. You think you can just walk in here? Into the business I built? You have no power here, Austin. None." "I made you," he sneered. "I introduced you to the people who gave you these contracts. You're nothing without my network." I laughed. It was a dark, cold sound. "I got the Hawthorne contract because I know how to mix horsehair plaster. You don't even know what that is. You didn't make me, Austin. You were an obstacle I had to climb over." I picked up my desk phone. "Leo, call the police. Tell them we have an intruder." Austin's face went white. He was a lawyer. He knew what a police report looked like. "You're making a mistake," he muttered. "You're going to regret this." "The only thing I regret," I said, leaning over my desk, "is that I didn't walk out of that bistro 3 years earlier. Get out." He stared at me for one long, hateful second. Then he turned and stormed out. I sat down. My hands were shaking again, but this time I didn't cry. I looked at the blueprints on my desk. I picked up my pencil. I went back to work. November. The annual Preservation Gala. It was the Super Bowl of my industry, and this year it was being held at the Hawthorne Theater, my theater. We had finished Phase 1, the lobby and the ballroom. The invitation was sitting on my kitchen counter. "You staring at that piece of cardstock like it's a bomb?" Mason asked. He was at my stove making pasta. He was really good at pasta. "Austin will be there," I said. "His firm bought a table. It's a networking event." "Okay," Mason said. And I'm scared," I admitted. "Not of him, just of the feeling. The way he used to make me feel small. What if I see him and I shrink again?" Mason turned off the burner. He walked over to the island and took my hands. His hands were warm and rough. "You won't shrink," he said, "because you've outgrown him, but you don't have to do it alone." "You hate galas," I said. "You said black tie is a prison for men." "It is," he smiled, "but I would very much like to be your +1. I want to stand next to you while you show off that theater. I want to hold your purse while you accept your accolades. And if he comes near you, I want to be the physical reminder that you upgraded." I laughed, tears pricking my eyes. "Upgraded?" "Significantly." He kissed my forehead. "Wear the green dress, the one that makes you look like a warrior queen." The dress was emerald green silk, backless, with a slit up the side that was strictly for danger. It cost a fortune. I didn't care. We took a town car to the theater. When we pulled up, the marquee was lit up. Hawthorne Preservation Gala. "I did that," I whispered, pointing at the marquee. "I fixed the wiring for those lights." "Hell yes, you did," Mason said. We walked in. The lobby was breathtaking. We had restored the Art Deco murals, stripped the grime off the gold leaf, and replaced the carpet with a custom weave that matched the 1928 original. The room was packed. People were gasping at the restoration. "Mallory!" Mr. Sterling rushed over. "It's magnificent, the acoustics. We tested the sound system yesterday and it's perfect." Thank the horsehair, I smiled. I was holding court. People were coming up to me, not as a +1, not as a decoration, but as the architect. Mason stayed by my side, hand on the small of my back, beaming like he had built it himself. Then I saw him. Austin was by the bar. He looked desperate. He was with a woman I didn't recognize, a young blonde who looked bored and miserable, checking her phone. He was trying to talk to a partner from another firm, but the man was looking over Austin's shoulder, scanning the room for someone more important. Austin turned. He saw me. He saw the green dress. He saw the confidence. He saw Mason. I felt Mason tense up. "Steady," I whispered. "I'm fine," Mason said. "Just enjoying the view." Austin handed his drink to his date, didn't even look at her, and started walking toward us. The circle of people around me parted. They sensed the collision. "Mallory," Austin said. His voice was loud, performing for the crowd. "Well, you certainly clean up nice." It was a compliment wrapped in an insult. "You usually look like trash." "Hello, Austin," I said. My pulse was steady. "And Dr. Rhodes?" Austin nodded at Mason. "Still playing bodyguard?" "Still playing surgeon," Mason said evenly, "though I specialize in hearts, not egos, so I can't help you much." Someone nearby snickered. Austin's face flushed red. "Cute," Austin spat. He turned back to me, his eyes raking over my dress. "So this is the big project. It's nice, a bit gaudy for my taste, but I suppose that's your style. A lot of flash, not much substance." The room went quiet. He was doing it again, the bistro dynamic, trying to humiliate me to elevate himself. "Actually," I said, my voice projecting perfectly thanks to the acoustics I had designed, "it's not flash, Austin. It's structural integrity." I stepped closer to him. I wasn't afraid. I was 6 inches shorter than him, but I felt 10 feet tall. "You spent 3 years telling me I was nothing special," I said. "You told me I played with dollhouses. You told me I couldn't stand beside you." I gestured to the room, to the soaring ceiling, to the gold leaf, to the hundreds of people admiring my work. "I don't play with dollhouses, Austin. I build monuments. I take things that are broken and rotten and forgotten, and I make them strong again. I did it with this theater, and I did it with myself after you tried to wreck me." I looked him dead in the eye. "You destroy people to make yourself feel big. I build things to make the world beautiful. That is the difference. And that is why you are standing there alone, and I am standing here, surrounded by my work." "I'm not alone," Austin stammered, looking back for his date. But she was gone. She had drifted away to the buffet. "You are," I said softly. "You're the emptiest room in the building." I turned my back on him. "Come on, Mason. I want to show you the balcony." We walked away, and behind us, nobody spoke to Austin. The crowd just closed in, ignoring him, leaving him standing in the middle of the lobby I built, completely and utterly irrelevant. 3 months later. So here we are. Austin is gone. Not dead, just gone from the high-stakes world. Rumor has it he was quietly asked to resign from his firm after a series of HR complaints from junior associates who decided they didn't want to be bullied anymore. He's working at a small personal injury firm in the suburbs now. I blocked his number, so I don't know the details. I don't care. My firm just won the bid for the Providence Opera House. It's a 5-year project. I had to hire 3 more architects. And Mason. Last night we were on the roof of his brownstone, which is almost finished, by the way. The stairs are fixed. No squeaks. We were drinking cheap beer and looking at the stars. He turned to me and said, "You know, you fixed the house. You fixed the theater. You kind of fixed me, too." "You weren't broken," I said. "I was lonely," he said. "That's a kind of broken." He pulled a ring out of his pocket. It wasn't a diamond, it was a vintage sapphire, Art Deco, 1920s. "It has history," he said. "I thought you'd like the structural integrity." I said yes, obviously. I still think about that day at the bistro sometimes, the shame, the heat, the finger pointing in my face. I used to hate that memory. Now, I'm grateful for it. Austin was right. A woman like me could never stand beside a man like him. I was meant to stand somewhere much, much higher. And the view from up here, it's spectacular. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.